What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is Orioles Today, and as always, I am Sean Ferguson. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode, and if you are a fan of today's episode, please give that like button a high five, and if you're a fan of this content, please subscribe. Get yourself daily notifications for all of these daily video drops covering all things the Baltimore Orioles. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support that this channel continues to get. Well over 1,600 subscribers. Thank you guys so much. It really, truly does mean a lot. And for today's episode, it is mainly going to focus on arbitration day. That was yesterday, Thursday, January 8th, 2026. We're going to take a look at the list of Orioles players that were able to agree to deals and avoid arbitration, and the few players that are headed to arbitration with Baltimore. We're going to see a few of these players, what it means for the bigger picture, and take a look around the league to see which of some of the top players around the league were unable to come to terms with their teams. And of course, starting off with the Orioles, here's the list of Orioles that were able to come to terms with the team. And as of this recording, just 2 players did not agree to terms and will head to arbitration. For the players that did agree, you had Taylor Ward. He agreed to $12.175 million. Trevor Rogers agreed to $6.2 million. Tyler Wells, he agreed to $2.445 million. Dean Kramer, he agreed to $5.75 million. Adley Rutschman agreed to $7.25 million. Shane Baz agreed to $3.5 million. Yinyer Cano agreed to $1.6 million. Gunnar Henderson, he agreed to a whopping $8.5 million. Back in November, Felix Bautista, he already agreed to $2.25 million. And the big one, Ryan Mountcastle, he agreed to a 1-year deal. It was worth $6.787 million, and that also came with a club option for 2027 worth $7.5 million. So the Orioles were able to come to terms with all those players. The 2 players that were unable to reach deals, that is Keegan Aiken and Kyle Bradish. They will both go to arbitration, and they will try to, well, the judge will hear what they offered and the Orioles offered, but out of that list of players, just those 2 were unable to make deals with the O's. And kind of looking at one of those guys to start, that is Gunnar Henderson. He signed a record deal, that $8.5 million that Henderson signed, or agreed to, I should say. That is a franchise record for a player in his first year of arbitration eligibility in Orioles club history. So that's pretty big. You look at what he did last year. He's only 24 years old. His numbers were skewed compared to, or I should say down, compared to what he did in 2023. He did hit .274, 17 home runs, and he had 30 steals in 154 games. And, you know, the Orioles go ahead and give him that kind of money and that kind of deal for next season, or this upcoming season, I should say. And that kind of shows you that how much they believe in him. And with the supporting cast that they have around him, especially the power bats they brought in like a Ward and an Alonso, just kind of what they feel that he can get back to. And decent numbers last year, but they're expecting more power numbers again like they saw from the year before. But again, he had that chemistry with Anthony Santander, and I think it's going to be there with some of the guys I just mentioned and an Alonso Ward. I think that's going to bring it back, and I think you are going to see these numbers elevate for Gunnar Henderson, and I think there's definitely going to be a guy when he becomes eligible for free agency. I believe is in 2028. The Orioles are going to do everything they can to lock him down, and I see this big pay raise for him and this record money in his first year of arbitration eligibility. I see that as a sign of things to come, hopefully, of Henderson staying in Baltimore. And I do want to talk about Ryan Mountcastle's deal. I know a lot of people have talked about his deal that he signed with Baltimore and what that could mean. I did want to kind of look around the league at some top players from bigger teams that were unable to reach deals, one of them being Tarek Skubal with Detroit. So he filed at $32 million and the team filed at $19 million. So again, that shows you kind of where Skubal is expecting this money to be. So those The Tigers and Skubal will be headed to arbitration. A few other players of note, Joe Ryan is another one. He was unable to come to terms with the Twins. Isaac Paredes with the Astros, he was unable to come to terms as well. Chris Bubich was another one with the Royals. Graham Ashcraft with the Reds, he was unable to come to terms. And the numbers with Aiken and Bradish, I know I said that they were the two players for the Orioles that did not come to terms on a deal and were unable to avoid arbitration. Aiken, he filed at $3.375 million, the O's at $2.975, and Bradish filed at $3.55, and the team filed at a $2.875. So these numbers, I know it's a lot of numbers that I'm throwing out there, but we expected Ward's numbers to be elevated, and again, making a little bit over $12 million. So that wasn't surprising. You expected that coming into, like, it was going to be a pay raise coming in to this upcoming season. You expected a little bit of a pay raise with Henderson, probably not as much as he got, but it still makes sense. And then kind of the rest of the money out there, it's to be had, it's to be expected. Rutschman a little over $7 million. So none of these numbers are really breaking the bank, but it kind of shows you where the Orioles are at with some of these players. And same thing kind of with Trevor Rogers too, making a little bit over $6 million. It's, these players are slowly but surely getting to a point where you're having to give them these deals to avoid arbitration, but it really just feels like free agency is right around the corner. So I know I see a lot of people saying we still need to go out and sign this and sign this and sign that. But if they're still set on certain players like a Henderson and a Rutschman and a Westberg, and they want these guys to be pivotal parts of the organization for years to come, you got to keep that in mind as well when you're giving out some of these bigger deals. And yes, they have new ownership, but it's going to be really interesting when these guys do become free agents soon of how many of them they're actually going to be able to keep. And it's kind of something that you saw like with the Samuel Basallo. It's like, hey, please do that with a bunch of these guys, because if you possibly let them get to a point where they hit free agency, you're going to lose most of them. And that's kind of how it's been over the years. It's kind of feel like the Orioles were one of those teams, very low market organization where they would build these players up and then lose them to the Yankees or Red Sox or Dodgers. And just as a fan, I know a lot of us fans, we have so much time invested in these players that we want to see them as Orioles for a while. And you kind of saw that with Pete Alonso, and a lot of Mets fans were not happy that the Mets let him go. They thought they were going to have him for years and years to come, but now he's in Baltimore. So, seeing these players sign these deals to avoid arbitration is just, it's cool to see. And some of them get pay raises, just kind of a lot of their hard work that they've had over the last couple seasons just to get to this point. And just remind you that they're going to be hitting free agency sooner rather than later. And hopefully they're able to keep a lot of these guys, and it's going to be something to keep an eye on, how they're able to budget for these next couple of seasons coming up when these guys start to become free agent eligible. But those were some of the bigger names. Again, mainly Tarek Skubal was one of the biggest names that was unable to come to terms with his team, especially for the money that he filed compared to what the Tigers filed. And now I want to kind of get into Ryan Mountcastle. And I have said this for a bit that I do not believe that Ryan Mountcastle is going to be on the Orioles for 2026. And that was even before Pete Alonso was acquired. And once he was acquired, a lot of people said we're already starting to say goodbye to him and Kobe Mayo. And the more that talks are coming out, especially from Mike Elias, it really makes it feel like Mayo is staying. And he said certain things too about the possibility of Mountcastle staying as well. But you feel it more when he talks about Mayo and just the possibility of moving him to different positions, corner, outfield, third base, whatever it might be. And if the injury bug rears its ugly head again in 2026 like it did this past season in 2025, then it would not hurt at all to have as much depth as possible. And that's where we're going to continue to keep our eyes on this 26-man roster and what it's going to look like, and this extra depth the Orioles are going to have possibly down in AAA Norfolk as well. So a lot going on with that. But with this Ryan Mountcastle deal, the reason why I say that it could potentially increase his trade value, because that's something that we felt on too. It's, yes, I don't believe he's going to be on the Orioles for 2026, but what does that look like? We could easily package him up in a trade and send him elsewhere. but you're going to have to put more in that trade package to make that happen. But if you look at the deal that he just signed, that deal is not as much as many thought it was going to be. It's actually, I believe it's a little bit more than $1 million less than what he was projected to make this upcoming season. So when you're a team out there who could be a small market team too, that might want to add Mountcastle to your team. Again, he's only 28 years old, and he's coming off a down season, but there is still that potential, and he's not in his 30s yet. They might want to make a deal for him. That number looks way more appealing down in the 6s than it does up in the 7s. And again, over $1 million less than what he was projected to do, and there is that club option. So that also gives a little leeway for the club also that could possibly pull the trigger on that trade. So that makes this a lot more interesting surrounding Mountcastle. That number that he signed, it could make it a whole lot more appealing to another team, and it could boost his trade value up a little bit. So as we continue to wait and see if the Orioles are going to sign one of these top free agent starters, and a Valdez, a Suarez, whoever it might be, the questions still remain, are they still going to make a few more trades here or there to really clean up what this 26-man roster could look like heading into spring training? We will see, and this could be one of those things where they're still sharpening their edges and rounding things out, and this could be one of those things where they get Mountcastle's deal down a little bit more than expected and could possibly make this more of a valuable asset to trade him. But guys, that is going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. And if you were a fan of this episode, please give that like button a high five. And if you're a fan of this content, please subscribe. Get yourself daily notifications for all of these daily video drops covering all things the Baltimore Orioles. I will see you guys on the next episode. This is Orioles Today. I am Sean Ferguson, and let's go O's.